What's up, people? Welcome back to another episode of Kickoff Sessions podcast. Welcome to the 40th episode, and welcome to the next podcast with Conor Carlson. We initially recorded an episode number 8, which is all around training and nutrition, but looking at it from more of an entrepreneurial background and kind of perspective. This episode is all around training and nutrition again, but more so about returning back to the gyms. Yes, gyms are reopening in Ireland and other countries over the next couple of weeks. And what we want to do was meet up to discuss how to plan your training, how to plan your nutrition, and what you should really do to get back into a healthy and kind of a happy routine. We've all been kind of anxious to get back to the gym, me especially. And going back to the gym means you need to have realistic expectations. Joining a gym, joining any gym, or joining a new training routine can be difficult at the best of times, especially when gyms have been closed for up to 5 months in Ireland specifically, not to mention other countries as well. So it's very important for today just to discuss how to improve, how to plan your training. Myself and Conor look at it from multiple different angles. We go through a day-by-day process, how to build a healthy routine and where to kind of set your goals and expectations. We also fall into areas of nutrition, looking at nutrition from different lenses to fit into your career, fit into your normal routine, amongst many other things. Being a careers podcast, it's important to take a career spin on things. So we look into building nutrition into your work life and the importance of doing it just from a personal perspective and as well as just from a health perspective as well. So if you want more detail on Conor's background, you can check him out on Instagram. You can check him out on multiple different platforms, especially YouTube. And they've been growing their online business, which is specialized health and training, fitness plans for people that are competing, people that are looking for photo shoots, as well as all different walks of life. So before we get going, if you could subscribe on YouTube, keep that momentum going, as I'm still in the early days of YouTube and I want to just get off to the right foot, and build out a bit more content around this. So there'll be more clips to follow. As always, that is my new model of building out my YouTube. And that's pretty much it. So I'll leave right here. Here is my conversation with Conor Carlson, all around training, all around nutrition, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, we look to be pretty good. Conor, How are we doing?
Hey Darren, hope you are doing well.
Yeah, it's good to meet up again. Like after the first time, obviously I mentioned earlier that like really successful like first episode, and what's really good is like provides like actionable, helpful information to people. And that's kind of the whole idea, is that like just building in like training, nutrition plans because into like your daily routine, because as you know, like when you're working on your like heavy working day schedule, it's hard to build in something that's long term. So I think getting your perspective last time was really helpful for other people, and now doing something similar, going into like summer training, preparing, going back to the gym, and just getting into good shape again is going to be like really helpful.
Yeah, I think like around this time it can be a very like hit or miss time, because with the gyms coming back in this scenario for Ireland in the coming weeks, it could be a time where you kind of might feel a bit anxious returning to the gym environment, being around people. If you've been training from home, if you've completely gone off the grid with training, again, you're kind of nervous to get back into it. So hopefully you can kind of talk through a few things that can set people up to feel kind of calm, reassured, and kind of confident going into like the coming weeks and months, which is really important. So.
And what's interesting about that is the fact that like it doesn't matter if you're inexperienced or experienced, people still face the same like anxiety. So for example, like I built the gym, I got weights ordered and made from a guy in Tala, and they were like just so haphazard, but I was training at home for months and taking over. But then I went back to a gym recently and I was like, I am off par. I was like, muscle definition has reduced. I was like, my overall like cardiovascular training has reduced. And really, when you don't have that gym structure, and then therefore I've had to even just try to get onto my own schedule of like, all right, let's get my shit together, but do it in such a way that it is like practical and realistic as well.
And that being said, I remember from lockdown last year, I got such a routine of training from home because I had a good enough setup in my shed. I remember there was like a private facility I could train in like once a week, and it was just when the lockdown just started to ease, and I didn't even like want to almost go back into it. I was like such in a routine of like, oh, I'm actually fine doing it from home. So I think as humans we're very, very routined, and sometimes change can be tough. So just for people to kind of have an open mind of kind of getting back into the gym, And once they give themselves like a few sessions back, they'll start to feel really good, and they'll be like, okay, this is actually much better than I was training from home. But it will take a bit of time, and that is something I say, because people can think like an adjustment from, let's say, a good training environment like a gym to a home training environment is going to be really challenging, which it is. But sometimes it can just be as challenging going from a home setup, which doesn't have much going on, to gym setup. So even if your environment is improving, change can actually still be really, really tough to undergo. And it's, don't kind of feel that you're going to go in and feel amazing and feel like you did the last time you stepped foot in the gym, and that everything feels perfect, you feel great on the machines and everything like that, because realistically you won't. So the main thing you want to get in your head when you're first getting back into the gym is just to kind of get through it, tick the boxes, get through the session, get used to saying hi to people, the machines, getting used to just being in that environment. And if you can just focus on that and not so much your training performance in the first few sessions, by, let's say, a week into it, things will be like kind of feeling back to normal. You'll be feeling good. So that's just the one thing I would definitely say to people, because you could really go in, get out of your first session and be like, oh my God, like that didn't feel that good for me at all. I didn't really enjoy that as much as I thought I would, or something along those lines. And they could be feeling down or self-doubting. But just for you to understand, that's kind of normal, and it will take you a few sessions to kind of get into it.
Yeah, I completely agree as well, because like even when I first went back, man, I straight went into benching, put 240s on either hand and made a flat bench, and I actually got dizzy because I was just so unused to the movement. And again, exactly like you said there, but I did like all the wrong things. So I was looking to train properly, wasn't able to do it. And then I kind of just felt a little bit kind of down from it. But then muscle memory, 4 days into it, I always say it's like the 4-day like rebound. I was just back just being pretty fit and pretty healthy. So then trying to build in that routine, and now I'm kind of in a flow of doing my regular like push pull legs and whatever. So I'm getting to that kind of stage. But to get into like maybe like building maybe routine, building some sort of training schedule first to get back, what would be your kind of approach towards that? And how would you really kind of go about building something that's, tailored towards where someone wants to go to, or where they previously were at? Because without having the same access to information or access to even the equipment, it's very difficult to have that foresight beforehand.
Yeah. So I'd say the main one, talking about training routine first, would be kind of your availability to train. So as a coach, that's something we always ask the client, like, what is your availability to train within the week? There's some individuals, very busy work schedules, very busy family life at home. They can only train like 3 days a week, let's say. There could be another individual who's very much happy to train every day. Not saying they would train every day, but they're kind of open window, have a lot of time to train and prioritize that. So that's like the first place I would start. And I wouldn't put pressure on yourself to have to go 5 days a week or something like that. So pick a realistic kind of training split that works well for you. So if you're someone that's training, let's say, just 3 days a week, more so favoring something like a full body split. If you can, let's say, increase it to 4 days a week, and upper lower, where you're getting to focus a bit more on upper one day, lower another day, just because you can go a bit more. As Darren just mentioned there, he's doing push-pull legs. So that could be for someone who's kind of able to go 5-6 days within the week, where they can say, okay, I have more training days here, so I can actually put more emphasis on back a certain day, on my chest and shoulders a certain day. But as I said, then for the other individuals who can't do that, if you're only going 2 or 3 days a week, and you're just doing a full session, let's say, on back, wouldn't be the best for you. So kind of prioritizing full body or something in those instances. So that would be like the first place I would look in regards to it. Secondly, then you said equipment. So just kind of what equipment they're going to have in the gym. So if they're going to a new gym, if they're going back to an old gym, just kind of looking at probably, if let's say they've been doing something from home, just trying to kind of progress that into how you can adjust that then going back into the gym. And always, like as you said, you kind of went into things going quite like heavy on dumbbells and stuff like that, just taking your time with like the volume that you do from the get-go. So really, like, less is more from the get-go. So if you can go in, if you're only doing, let's say, one working set per exercise, and the rest are kind of feeler sets, where they're just warm-up sets, you're getting used to execution, skill acquisition, so important. It is a skill and training. So you might not think of it as a skill because you're quite conditioned every day that you're in the gym. But now that you've been out of the gym for a while, you kind of realize it actually is a skill once again. So that would be, from a training standpoint, would be kind of like the main things that I would touch on. And then let's say if they're thinking about physique development as well. So either themselves or a coach having them visualize their physique. So what is their actual goal with their physique? If they're looking at their physique for a female, does she want to get bigger glutes? Does she want to grow her delts a bit? For guys, do they want bigger arms? Do they want to focus more on their back? So using that as well when it comes to your training split. So let's say, for example, we have a female and she really wants to focus on her glutes and she's quite advanced. She likes to train 5 to 6 days a week. You mentioned push-pull. You like doing a push-pull legs. For a female in that case, you could do something like push, you could do legs, and then on pull days, you could add in some extra glute work because it's kind of working similar areas and similar movements. So again, that's kind of for, let's say, the more advanced lifters where they're kind of thinking not just about getting back into the gym, but getting back into the gym and working areas they want to put extra focus on. So that would be kind of the main things there.
Yeah, I completely agree as well, because especially from the weak spot perspective, when you're out of the gym and you're training with bands or even just basic weights at home, it's very difficult to get that consistency across the board towards each muscle group. So like perfect example is like my legs when I was out. So I had dumbbells that were going from 40, 30, 20 and 10, but still this didn't have much help for my legs because I could only do like Bulgarian split squats, goblet squats, walking lunges, and that's pretty much it, to be honest. And as a result, I just knew that my quads, even my glutes, were just quite underdeveloped. So even though I'm working hard to build up these areas, so back leg pressing and back squatting at the moment, I try to come in at a very low level. So squats only at like 80%, maybe at about 110, 120 kg, really slow, really controlled. But I'm trying to still work on those weak spots, but just do it in a bit of more of a practical and patient approach. Same with your bench as well. Like when you only can bench like flat bench at home because your bench doesn't adjust, you don't have any cables. Jumping back into it may seem like, oh, you can get up to that standard again, but really you can't, because it's the nuanced muscles between it. And even like the size of my dumbbells were so much different. So it's funny because it's kind of like starting from scratch, but I'm focusing on the weak spots, especially my chest, let's say, or even my back. It was just about just being kind of patient. I think that's where you could go into injury, and that's kind of an area that kind of wanted to touch on as well, because funnily enough, actually, man, so obviously I've been training like 6 days a week for like fucking God knows how long, the last couple of years, whatever. But as a result of like the rigidity of it, and as a result of me not being like that mobile and functional, I was playing basketball a couple of weeks ago, and I literally nearly tore my delt off my shoulder from throwing a ball because I was so unused to the movement of just functional training. And it really, really scared me at the time. And I went to a physio and she wanted me to get an MRI. And that's actually kind of the level I went to. It was a couple of months, to be fair, months ago. But again, it's a bit of an understanding, because like injury is real. You want to go, if you're going to come back, you're going to get screwed if you just get under the bar. And working with niggles, like I've had poor wrists, I've had poor shoulders for years, and I've also had a poor knee. So as a result of that, baking that into the equation.
Like you mentioning injury, but the other side of it then would be like thinking about your central nervous system and your fatigue and stuff like that. So if you go all hell for leather from the get-go, you might be kind of okay with it, but in 3 weeks' time, you could notice your fatigue has creeped up quite a lot. When other people in the gym are now really, really progressing on their weights and they're going to all new levels, you're feeling like you need to take extra rest days, or potentially take a few days off the gym, or your movements are stalling, like you're not increasing on them. So that could be a case as well. If going too quickly, you might look out on injury and stuff like that. But what might happen is that fatigue creeps up on you very, very quickly, rather than an individual who takes their time. And by their 3rd or 4th week, they're hitting their stride, and you're actually kind of feeling kind of crap because you kind of took it too heavy from the beginning.
And that's very realistic as well, even when you're quite flexible. So I'd be relatively well mobile, but having said that, though, fatigue is really hitting me. Like working late hours is probably the biggest thing when you wake up in the morning and your like resting heart rate is pretty high, and you know that you shouldn't really be training, but you're still training. And I just kind of feel myself like at that stage whereby you could easily just pick up and get injured, So how would you set like realistic expectations around this in terms of, would you plan out like a 2, 4, 6 week kind of location kind of spot of, let's say, for instance, I want to progress my weights, I want to get back to benching 100% capacity or whatever. do you have like a foresight on this and try to say, okay, I want to do this across like 8 weeks or 12 weeks, or do you think it should be feeling it out and kind of seeing where you go from the beginning?
That's a good question, and to be honest, I take a more feedback like week to week. So I'd start with like bare minimum volume in terms of if you set up your training plan the way you want it. As I said, kind of go in and let's say just do one working set and don't go to failure, particularly on your big movement. So squats, bench press, things like that. Keep a few reps in the tank. So if you can get 10 reps on a movement and you'd fail, go to 8 and say that's fine for today. And then when you move on to things like hamstring curl, side delts, biceps, if you want to kind of push yourself a bit more to failure on those, there's not as much risk involved. So that's completely fine to do. So then feed back to yourself at the end of the week. Is your DOMS, like, has your delayed onset muscle soreness, like, is it quite intense from each of your workouts? If it is, I would say go at the same volume again, because there's no point if you were getting a lot of DOMS from that style of volume, that then there's a need to increase on that. It's clear that you're doing quite enough and shouldn't really be doing more than that. So I'd use that again for the second week and do a similar volume approach, and then kind of assess things again. Okay, you're feeling fresher now, you're feeling better, execution's feeling better and stuff like that. Why don't we now increase it to kind of 2 working sets and stuff like that? If we used to be doing 2 reps in reserve, as I said on the squat, you're stopping at 8 reps. You now stop at 9 reps when you can get 10. So you're increasing your intensity as well as your volume and things like that. So I'd actually look at things a lot more kind of week to week like that. And if you continue with that kind of approach, I think it's kind of the safest way to doing things. And it's also, as you mentioned, with regards to expectations, it's not allowing you kind of have any expectations from the start. Because if you getting into the gym, let's say on your first day, the night before you start, so you're planning out your kind of next 8 weeks, and in your head you think you're capable of a lot more. So you've written in by week 3 that you should be back to benching like what you were doing beforehand or something like that. So that's kind of putting yourself under pressure, that could then lead to you kind of feeling upset, feeling down, risking things by pushing yourself too far. So if you can kind of take it all back and just take things day by day and week by week, and not going to set yourself a kind of long expectation, that's going to help you a lot kind of mentally and physically, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic, because like if you think of other types of goal setting, it is like longer term vision, but the fact that like all of our like general routine, because of restrictions and the gym closing, have adjusted, it's like the shorter the window, almost the better. And then that periodic review, if it's weekly
100%.
or bi-weekly, is the best way to kind of move forward, you know. But I think what's really interesting is that like usually we put training in one bucket and dieting in one bucket, but really like compositions, even my own physical composition has quite changed over the last couple of months, negatively, obviously, because I didn't have the availability of just my natural kind of tendencies, what I would usually do, even if it's like, you know, you'd have a lot of kind of low intensity, just steady speed, kind of walking around, just daily activity. Like your NEAT would be pretty high, your TDE would be pretty high, you just go and grabbing a coffee, go and grabbing lunch. But do you think you should build in some sort of cardio aspect just to fix that kind of body composition from the beginning? Or do you think there needs to be like some sort of kind of rebalance towards it? Because in my own example, that was one thing I tried to do, was just try to increase my overall just total daily expenditure, basically because I was not like a slump, but I was definitely not doing enough. Like if I looked at my steps, my average steps, it's actually interesting. A good exercise to try is go onto your Apple phone, if you have an Apple phone, look at your daily steps. You can do it by year or by month. I'd encourage you to do it by year. If I looked at my average steps for this year, I think it was like 6,500, 7,000. If I go back a year, so when COVID started, it was like 8, because when the summer months. If I go back to 2019 and 2018, man, it was like 10,000 steps on average a year, 11,000, 12,000. And that was the thing about being young, number one, 2, just be running around college, and 3, just not having an actual proper like solid job, you know. So that's a long-winded way to say like, how do you set up your kind of like cardio or your cardiovascular kind of exertion around your training at the moment?
Yeah, it's actually an interesting one, and there's definitely like kind of a lot of different answers to it depending on where the individual is. So first, let's take it from someone, let's say, who was very active during lockdown, but they didn't have much weight available. But they were just kind of doing what they could to kind of keep themselves busy, going out for a lot of walks throughout the day, just kind of more from a mental perspective. Then you kind of have to look at what is their actual goal when they come back into the gym. So if it's building muscle and things like that, there actually wouldn't be a need to be saying, okay, we need to be increasing your cardio and stuff like that. It could just be more so focusing on, okay, getting back into the gym, more load available. Your expenditure will actually increase from that alone, obviously having more load, more intensity with your training and stuff like that. So it'd just be kind of monitoring how that individual goes to see kind of do they need more food, actually pull back down their activity and stuff like that. As you mentioned then, for someone kind of like you who noticed that their NEAT levels were down a lot and their daily steps were down from where it used to be, if they're just getting kind of back into the gym and stuff, again, it's really important that you kind of don't overwhelm an individual as well. So for the first week or two, if all they're doing is getting themselves back into the gym, that's enough. Like if they're going to the gym and they haven't been training before, that's enough for how much it'll increase their expenditure. And then I suppose for those individuals looking a bit more in depth after you've kind of found a routine back to the gym, saying to yourself, okay, what is my goal? Am I trying to lose body fat and get fitter for the summer, as you mentioned? Yes. I'm now in a good routine in the gym. What's my daily steps? Okay, they're about 7,000. Let's try get my NEAT up to about 10,000 and let's see how we get on for this week. So you've kind of got yourself back into the gym with in a routine, with the gym. So you're not overwhelmed from that aspect. You're now kind of looking a bit more clearly. You're seeing your daily steps. You're increasing on that. And it's really important for you to kind of keep monitoring yourself. So if your goal is losing body fat, losing weight, the day you increase your steps from 7,000 to 10,000, take a note of what your weight was fasted in the morning. So let's say you were 60 kg. If you then go through the full week and you check in, you weigh yourself next week, and let's say you're 59.7, so you're down 0.3. So we kind of show that you're in a small bit of a deficit. So what you did from a training and diet perspective was good enough for you to lose a bit of weight, but at the end of the day, it's only 0.3. So then you could say to yourself, okay, now it's time to maybe add in some cardio for myself because I want to create a bigger deficit if my goal is getting down towards 55 kg. So now let's put in 25 minutes cardio on a rest day. And let's see how I respond to that this week and kind of taking it from that. So again, it's kind of a similar approach there, in that it's kind of like taking feedback from yourself, making a change, taking feedback again, making a change. And that's like the best way to approach it, in my opinion.
Yeah, making it very iterative, like as it's an ongoing process. Because instead of just jumping in and trying to figure out what works best for you. Because like when I went back training as well, like I was trying to improve my muscle quality, but at the same time lose fat, because like I was kind of like just wanted to get in check. And now I've kind of gotten to a stage where I'm at a nice standard of leanness, so I can decide to either drop my calories or drop my cardio. Increase my cardio, drop my calories, and that's kind of a nice balance to be in. But again, having that understanding, because kind of feeds nicely into dieting. But where I always find is that, like, so I'm dieting this year for quite a long time, probably about 16 weeks, but it's going to be slow, controlled. I've already been dieting for like 8 weeks now at this stage. And what I've noticed is that you can pull two levers. It's the diet lever or the cardio, of increasing the cardio. So what I've been trying to do is just control my eating at around 2,400 calories generally, because that just works well for myself, in around 180 grams of protein, 300 grams of carbs, and about 60 grams of protein or 6 grams of fat usually. But then increase my cardio to a point whereby it's still manageable. So I don't want to be doing cardio for 45 minutes a day if it means I could have just dropped my calories a small bit, So I think 100%. Where I'm at nicely would be, it's probably about 15-20 minutes of low intensity, like hill walking 4 times a week. But that's kind of integrated nicely into my training, because the situation with myself and for a lot of people listening is that, like, I spend a lot of time on my laptop during the day working. I could work for maybe 50, 55 hours a week roughly with podcasting and stuff. And because of that, I kind of want to be moving more. That's a personal preference, but I want to be kind of doing more steps, because like otherwise I could sit at my desk and just don't really feel that healthy, So that's my own situation, and that's pulling the two different training levers and the diet lever. But for your own perspective, like, when you're looking at dieting, creating a dieting plan now that is in line with your training, how would you go about maybe configuring that? You know, it could be bulking, it could be cutting, or just getting into a healthy routine. But really, like, what's your kind of first steps for, I don't know, making something that's quite personalized to yourself? What factors should you be taking into consideration?
Yeah, so I think the kind of common misconception with kind of your food plan and dieting and stuff like that is that it's going to be something, it can't be something that you can enjoy, and that's definitely not right. So like for individuals who come on board with us in their questionnaire, we talk through foods that they enjoy and foods that they don't enjoy, and that's so important for us, because at the end of the day, for this to be like a long-term sustainable kind of thing for you, you have to enjoy it. You have to actually like the foods that you're having. So meals being tasty is so important. It's, to be honest, it's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, you can have the best plan on paper in terms of your macronutrients and your calories and thinking everything, but if an individual can't be consistent to that, then it's pretty much useless. So I think that's always like the first and most important place to start, is finding something that you'll actually enjoy and that you're not dreading. So having that kind of mental switch to enjoying the food that you're on is really important. That'll be kind of number one. Two is then kind of looking a bit more deeper, and this will come with a bit more experience, but it's kind of the foods that digest well with you is really important as well. So there's some foods that just won't sit well with you, and there's other foods that sit really well for you. I can use myself for a personal example. So something that I would have, let's say, pre-workout before I train, is cream of rice. If you've ever heard of it, it's kind of like a rice form. And it's the one time in the day that I have whey protein. So every other meal in the day, I have kind of whole sources of protein, chicken, red meat, and stuff like that. But for me, for it to digest the best, me having like cream of rice and whey protein mixed together is going to sit a lot better on my stomach, opposed to me having chicken and pasta just before I train. So it's going to look, that's, again, it's a bit more advanced, but once you kind of find the foods that you enjoy, then start looking at things a bit deeper and saying, do these foods sit well with me? How do I feel after eating these meals and stuff like that? And that would be kind of the second place then I'd go with it.
That's quite interesting as well, because like finding out what works best for you. And I think when I started cutting this year, I remember, just because I'm quite similar, like I'd have like porridge and protein like every morning and like every night. But when I was bulking, so it's funny because I usually eat a standardized diet. So it could be like porridge and protein, chicken and rice, steak and rice, whatever. But then for when I'm bulking, I just increase the quantity. So usually of the carbs and of the protein to maybe like 200 grams or whatever. But then when I'm cutting, what I try to do is just reduce it. So I don't know what your thoughts on that would be, but it would be to keep it quite consistent. But I remember thinking when I was about to cut, I was like, fuck, I might have to change and swap out like an oatmeal, like an oat meal for that day. But I was like, I actually kind of like it and I want to stick with it. So what I did was just kind of reconfigured and rebalanced my diet, because I was like, look, I prefer taking like an extra 10 grams of carbs if it meant I'm a little bit happier over a longer period, you know. And that's kind of my kind of approach. Whereas before I would be very like cold turkey. It's like, oh, I'm cutting, I need to have like fucking 4 salads a day and things like this, you know. I used to create a new diet for when I was either bulking or cutting, which isn't really the best idea. And I think that's what went into sustainability and making it long term, which is another question I kind of have around building long-term kind of processes like this. Because what I often find is that cutting gives me a reward for me to stick around longer, whereas bulking doesn't give me that same reward. Like I'm 74.4 kg now, which is actually quite light, like in the context of things, but I came down from like 77, 78, I think at the moment, but which is like 4 kg in like 10 weeks or something. But I got up to like 80 or an 80 kg on my bulk, which is really high for usual. And I just wanted to get out. I wanted to get out of it, you know. So I wasn't able to kind of stick in it for that long period, which, you know, just kind of says more about the kind of sustainability of it. So how do you bake that into the kind of equation to build something that's long term, and even not even just from bulking, cutting perspective, but building in healthy routines over a longer period?
Yeah, very. So I'll talk just generally first, and then I will actually touch on bulking, because I think it is quite interesting what you're saying, because it is definitely the tougher one to stay consistent with. As you said, you're not really kind of seeing your hard work paying off, but when you're cutting and you're seeing the lines and the changes to your physique, it's kind of easier to kind of keep on track. So in general, what I'm saying, maybe one that's surprised, but staying like consistent, obviously depending at your level. But if you're only someone who wants to like improve, and just as kind of lifestyle change for you, still being social is really, really important. So don't go into like a dieting plan, a cutting or a bulking phase and feel like this has to kind of consume your life and stuff like that, because it doesn't have to be 100% or 0%. It really, really doesn't. And that's something I'm a big advocate of. Kind of having some downtime is important. So if that's you, and it's different for everyone and kind of what they enjoy. But let's say if it's you having a meal off a week with your partner, so you're really, really consistent throughout the week. On a Saturday night, you and your partner have a meal off, you stay in for takeaway, you go out for dinner, you just kind of completely shut off and you enjoy things. Like implementing something like that for yourself and to keep you more consistent throughout the week is really important. So that is definitely one thing I'd say, because if you wouldn't do that, and you say, no, I'm going to go like 100% with this, after 4 weeks, you're going to be like, oh, this is way too much. So instead of just having that one meal off, I'm actually just going to give up completely. So that would definitely be the one thing. Secondly is being passionate about wanting to make a change. So that's really, really important. And like, you have to understand from a physique standpoint, whatever your goal is, if it's building muscle or dropping body fat, you will have to get to a bit of like an uncomfortable level. Like you will have to feel a bit uncomfortable. So if that's you eating when you don't necessarily feel like it in a gaining phase, and you're like, oh, I'm quite full now, I shouldn't really be eating, but to hit your calories for that day, you do need to eat. It's just what you have to do. From a cutting perspective, you will get a bit hungry. Like there will be times where you want to eat, where you actually, for you to hit your goal, shouldn't be eating anymore for the day. So being kind of understanding that and saying, okay, for me to really change, for me to really improve like my physique or my habits in the way I want, it's not going to be easy. Because if it was easy, every single person that I'd walk past on the road or on the street would have an amazing physique, would feel absolutely brilliant, and would have the best habits in place. They don't, because it's hard to do. So I have to understand that what I'm undertaking here requires discipline and does take time. So kind of like reminding yourself of that, and then kind of on from that, it's valuing the goal. So you'll really only do that if you truly value the goal that you have. And it's kind of, if you embark in a fitness journey, the one thing I'd say to you is that it's your choice to do so. No one's making you do it. It's your choice to do so. So remembering that you're kind of in like a lucky position where you actually have the opportunity to cut down your food if you want, or increase your food if you want to, have an extra meal and things like that. Like there's loads of people in the world who don't have an opportunity like that. So kind of reminding yourself of that, having a lot of value towards the goal that you say you have. I think if you can kind of work on all of those things, it'll definitely help with you being kind of consistent.
Oh, I love that, man, because it's funny because like no one asked you to do it, you know, like as you said there, like no one asked you to go through these massive phases. So like it's quite interesting you said, because like I've recently moved in with my girlfriend and you've been living with Kate for so many years, and like when you go into these like, you know, relationships or anything, like you pull that person into your life. So I don't want to pass off me being in a cutting phase and being like super like grumpy and stuff all the time, you know. So like it's baked into the equation. And similarly, you said there about like adherence, you know, like my girlfriend's a yoga instructor, like she doesn't care anything about bodybuilding or whatever, like she's vegan, she does all that stuff. So I build in my own kind of, you know, diet and training around the kind of both of our schedules, and that's what kind of keeps that kind of like harmony and yin and yang, and makes it kind of like longer term. Because like otherwise, if it's short bursts of energy are great, but they don't actually achieve anything over a longer period. So having that essentially long-term view is much more valuable than short-term success.
And then just to touch on your point about bulking, because I'd say people would be quite interested with that. I think a big thing here, and it's something I'll always say if someone kind of joins the team for coaching and stuff, is, are you comfortable with your starting position now? So a lot of people will want to, their big goal is building muscle, but if they're holding on to a bit of body fat, they're not actually fully confident with, and they would like to kind of get rid of it a bit, definitely get rid of it before you start the building phase. I think that's really, really important. So if someone, as I said, joins and let's say their goal is, I really, really want to get bigger, but I can see when I assess their visual, they do have a bit of body fat to get off. I'd say, okay, let's look at dropping your body fat first for literally could only take up to 4 weeks. Once we do that, you're going to feel really confident, really happy with how lean you are. And now when we move into a building phase, you're going to be fully happy to cooperate with everything, because if there's a chance that when, as I said, there's that meal in the evening when you're feeling full, you're kind of feeling like, oh, I just feel a bit heavy, and you're not kind of wanting to eat. And you don't eat that meal because you're subconsciously not wanting to, let's say, gain body fat because you're not comfortable with the body fat you're at. It's just going to result in you spinning your wheels. And then you're going to have 8 or 10 weeks where you actually haven't put on any good degree of muscle. You haven't really worked on dropping body fat or improving anything. And it's just kind of a spinning of the wheel effect. So I think starting from a lean position is something that's really important. And then just to finish would be kind of remembering the long-term goal. So I'm sure when you go into that building phase, Darren, like one thing that you would have been thinking about is, how am I going to look the next time I get really, really lean? Are my biceps going to look a bit bigger? Are my delts going to be a bit more round? Are my quads going to have a bit more of a sweep and lines through them? And you're kind of putting in that work for that gaining phase for you to kind of achieve a look. So it's kind of understanding that, okay, I probably don't look the way I want to look or fully envision in the future right now, but I know the work that I'm putting in is going to allow me to kind of look my best that I have ever looked the next time that I cut down or something like that. So I think always kind of remembering that and kind of remembering that it is like, just think about your life as always wanting to progress. So if you dieted before and you looked a certain way, you want to beat that. You don't want to just kind of say, oh, I just want to maintain things like that. I don't think there's any, from my personal view anyway, that there's no fun in that. I think all areas of your life should be about progressing in some form or another. So I think remembering that if it's a bulking phase, it's just another chapter and you kind of progressing to like a better level of yourself.
Yeah, man, and especially when you're like going from a starting point. So like, doesn't matter where you are and what aspects of your life. Like when you're looking to take things forward, it's almost as if you have to be planning for it before it even comes. So like when I started my last gaining phase, which I think was 26th of December, coming up to Christmas, I wasn't taking the piss. Like I wasn't smashing food deliberately. I didn't want to start the gaining phase like essentially like fatter than I usually was. So I wanted to just be controlled going into it, and then can start layering up from there, which is good because this is the transferable stuff that goes into other aspects of your life. You know, like I uploaded a podcast this morning and I'm thinking about the next one straight after, and I'm looking to improve and things like this, you know. So it's interesting to see, like, just try to get that balance that is like, how can I keep on progressing, but also like actually appreciate what I'm doing along the way. Because, you know, even for myself, like looking at myself now, pretty lean, not as lean as what I could be, not as lean as I have been before, but I'm like, look, it's decent. You know what I mean? It's decent for now. I can turn up the dial and make things a bit more aggressive, and I probably will at some stage. But yeah, I think it's just being a little bit kind of realistic and sensible as well.
100%, definitely.
What about your own training, just to finish up on that? So obviously you've been, you know, out in Dubai, really trying to turn things up now recently, and like seeing massive growth in your own physique, and it's just literally just going from strength to strength. Same with Kate as well. Like she's looking incredible as well at this stage. You know, what's your kind of strategy for the next couple of months and the top tier of bodybuilding?
So it's actually an interesting one. So the coach that I was under just recently actually stopped coaching. They're an individual who kind of their personal brand and supplements, and they have an app and stuff like that that is going from strength to strength. So they actually couldn't put the time into coaching anymore. So for me, I'm quite a loyal person. I don't like change much. So I was in a position where I thought I'd actually be changing coach, but obviously I had to because they're stopping coaching. So I actually went back to previous coach who I worked with in 2018 when I won the overall actually. And funnily enough, he lives out in Dubai himself. So it's actually a completely different training approach to what I've been doing before. So my training approach before would have been kind of more of a low volume approach, but it would have been, everything would be like tracked meticulously. So logbook out, pen and paper, sets, reps, exact what weight you're on. So everything measured to like a T in order to progress that. This is like, it's kind of like similar to rugby, like, you know, like structured play versus unstructured play. So that was very like structured play, and now I'm kind of in unstructured play. So like there is still structure to it, but it's kind of like a different approach where there's a lot more volume to it, and you're kind of going to, it's not saying like stop after 3 sets. It's saying things like, it's an interest. I'll just go through it quickly. So if, let's say the weight you're going for is like 10 to 12 reps, instead of saying like 3 sets of 10 to 12 reps, you stop when the reps get below 7. So you keep to the same weight, you rest a minute. So you're getting 10 to 12, you rest a minute, you're getting maybe 9 to 10, rest a minute. And it's when you fatigue enough to get under 7, then you're done on that exercise. So it's kind of like, it's almost like, what I say, like a bulletproof way of knowing how to get to failure. So it's actually quite interesting from my own standpoint. And I think it's something I could integrate with clients who I might find aren't experienced about hitting failure if I want them to, and getting to new levels of intensity, because will kind of ensure that they do, because they won't stop until they get under a certain number, if that makes sense to you. So instead of leaving it just be like a mental thing that you have to think about, is actually just kind of doing things physically and stopping under a certain number, if that makes sense.
It seems like old style kind of bodybuilding, to be honest. It seems like people being in Gold's gym, just literally lifting up weight until they can't do it anymore. Who picked the number 7? Where did that come from?
Well, no, to be fair, that was just one example. So it's actually not it's different for different exercises. So I was just actually kind of running through one exercise. So I'm not 100% sure on the thought process towards 7. I don't think it's anything magic. But yeah, that was just like one example. So it's definitely an interesting way. And I think just for myself, from a coaching perspective, getting to use, I should never be stuck in one way of a training method, and it's definitely something I haven't been, because everyone's different, and I think training to your personality is really, really important as well. So for individuals listening, don't feel that you have to train a certain way. If, let's say, you're not the most intense person, you training to failure and seeing people doing that in the gym doesn't like sit well with you, and it's not something you think you could ever do, don't feel like, oh God, I can't make progress. So there's different training approaches, there's different training methods to suit you and your personality. Like, I know a lot of people who trains with like a reps in reserve approach, where they never really push themselves to failure, maybe like right at the end of a training block, but they're always kind of leaving a few reps in the tank. So there's a lot of merit in that type of training as well, and it will work really well for other people. There's other individuals who are quite aggressive, not in a bad way aggressive, but like aggressive. They can really kind of bring intensity and effort. So then like training to failure, doing kind of less volume and stuff will work really, really well for their physique. So again, don't try or don't kind of think that you have to train a certain way. And there's definitely a training way that suits you, that will be kind of applicable to you and will benefit you. That's important, I think.
That's very interesting, because people always look at what's going on around them. Like, you're looking at what's going on Instagram, and you're basing that as a model. And, you know, often you're inheriting someone's training program online. And, you know, for better, for worse, like, as in, it's a great starting point for sure. I think actually I was mentioning something yesterday around like leveraging the experience of others, like, you know, people that are like highly experts in certain areas, but you build it you use it as a platform, and then you use that platform to build your own model always. And that's just how it should be done. And that's where like uniqueness comes through and what fits best, you know. But I appreciate all your views. I'll just say a massive thank you. This was like awesome as always. Just nice, short, like accurate towards training and nutrition. And no doubt, like when people get back in the gym, like this will be like hugely valuable, because this is where people kind of fall down on. It's a gap. It's a gap in between. We want to get back where we are at the moment. How do we fill the gap? It's someone like yourself with all these years experience that can hopefully fill it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just to kind of summarize, and just for people to when you're getting into training, when you're getting into like a diet or a food plan and stuff like that, it's just changing your outlook on it. And it might maybe from like a trauma in the past that you find like dieting, you just hate them because you were on a fad diet that really, really restricted you, or you were on a training plan where someone kind of, you trained way too much. And just understand that that isn't the only approach. And if you kind of felt a way before and that reflected that, like there is an approach that's sustainable for you that you can actually enjoy. And as well, just when you get back into it, don't think about the outcome. Do not think about the outcome and where you're going to be in a few months' time. Just really get into like enjoying the process of everything and taking things day by day, because over lockdown, it's been really tough. So just really enjoy that you can get out, feel fulfilled, feel determined, feel productive, and get to the end of your day and having like a to-do list that you've written out and having every box ticked off and just feeling good about that. Like there's so much to be said about that. And there's a lot more than just the outcome of kind of losing body fat. And what you'll notice is if you focus on that process, all the facets of your life are going to improve. Your social life, your education, your financial, all these things will have benefit when you kind of look at everything from more just a process perspective and just enjoying things and taking them day by day. So I think that's kind of like the main kind of message I'd like to get across.
Yeah, just remind yourself why you're actually doing it in the first place, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Conor. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, buddy.